I'm Allie with PotomacBeads, and in this Better Beader episode, I'm going to give you a helpful hint to make your thread last longer and more durable. This has to do with the thread that is currently in the eye of your needle. We're going to look at this, and I'm going to explain to you how important it is to move your thread through your needle and the correct way to do so. So as you're creating jewelry, the first thing that you have to decide if you're bead weaving is what length of thread to cut. Some people like to cut huge amounts of thread and not tie on to their project at all. I do a 5-foot rule. I don't like more than that, more than basically the length of my arm span, because I get the thread tangled. When you start out with a super long piece of thread, one thing that is very easy to do is to be complacent and to keep the thread that is in the eye of the needle after you thread it always there. I want to caution against this. When you're looking at the eye of the needle, this is a size 12 needle. Generally speaking, as you get to the top or the bottom of that hole of the needle, you're going to have the needle itself kind of pinched in. So you look at that pinched in portion on my fingers and think about the fact that it's going to pinch in on the other side. The widest part of the opening of the needle is going to be the center of the needle. When you are putting thread in the needle and threading the needle or moving thread around the needle, you want to try to make sure that your thread is in the center of the eye of the needle. If you have it to one side or the other, you can inadvertently strip the thread. Depending on what thread you're working with, what size needle you're working with, and how tight it is in there, it's very, very likely and very possible to do if you do not keep the thread toward the middle of the eye of the needle. When you're working with your piece, naturally your thread is going to bend back along the needle. What that's doing is putting a lot of pressure and a lot of friction in the area where the thread is bent back on the needle. Not only because you're pulling the needle and the thread's coming, but you're also sewing through, like the Love Struck, a lot of these tiny beads in a repetitive motion. If you have something where you have crystals going through, you may also have to wiggle with a 15-0 and the needle coming out. With the long pieces of thread, it is very easy to bend your thread in half and have a long tail that's associated with it. And you work through your piece and you add your brick stitch or your square stitch and you work through, forgetting that it's a really good idea to move the thread along that eye of the needle as you're working. I try to do this every couple passes of beads, or every couple, if I have a right angle weave piece that I'm doing and it's a couple blocks, like say the Wimbledon, I want to move my thread in the needle itself several times throughout the bracelet, even if I don't necessarily need to, meaning I have plenty of length of thread. Some people are also not realizing when they put their thread in, you can have a longer tail than just that 2-inch. The less thread you have to pull through your bead and through your project, the faster beader you are. However, don't get stuck in the rut of keeping your thread in the exact same place on the eye of the needle throughout your entire project. You want to move it along the thread edge and make sure that as you're doing so, you're in the center of the needle, so you're not stripping it on one side or the other. And then also, you don't have one place where the tension has been for, say, 200 of your stitches, of your passes. And I say 200, but that's literally going to happen. You're adding more than 200 to a lot of your projects. So you don't want your thread and needle in the same place in the eye, that thread right there in that little crease, being constantly the same piece of thread. This is going to weaken your thread and cause it sometimes to break. You may not notice it as you're working on your project, but certainly as you move that needle, if you concentrate too long on that side, what you can do is see the fray as you're working with it. If you do start to see a fray in your thread, you may want to think about, one, did I move the thread enough, and gradually have it every couple passes, move it along the eye of the needle. 2, am I pulling on the thread rather than on the needle? And am I pulling on the thread area that is in that eye of the needle? When I'm working, I always want to pull on the piece of thread that's connected to the piece of jewelry, not the thread that's currently the tail through the eye of the needle. This needle position and the thread position in the needle is very important for the durability of your jewelry and of your bead weaving projects. Don't be complacent and let that same portion of thread in the eye of the needle for too long, or you'll be sorry if your thread breaks. While this was a short Better Beader episode, I hope that it gave you some really great information. Sometimes it's just those little tips that really can help to make you a more proficient beader. You can also comment below and give your suggestions, your ideas, how you deal with the thread that's inside the eye of the needle, and really help out this beading community at large. Remember, if you haven't yet, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Again, speaking of community, it also makes other people realize how awesome this craft is and they want to become members. As always, you can post your designs in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making, as well as contact us at any time to give ideas, suggestions, and ways that you think we can improve and be better. As always, if you haven't yet, give that little thumbs up too in the corner, and I'll see you next time here with your next Better Beader episode.